Hello, KK. Welcome. Welcome, everyone,
Yeah.
to this BEI series from the Organisational Psychology Department at Birkbeck. This is a forum where we come together bringing academics and current students and alumni to discuss the issues that are pertinent and relevant and important to organisational psychology and to the world of work. And today we're joined by KK Harris. I shall introduce her in a moment. But just to say that normally these events would be face-to-face, we'd be having network, we'd be having discussions, but in COVID times, we've introduced this series of short video interviews so that we can give voice to the matters that are really important to us. And today is certainly no exception. KK is a current student at Birkbeck on the postgraduate certificate in coaching, a future student on the MSc in coaching psychology, and a graduate of Birkbeck psychotherapy training. She works as a diversity and inclusion consultant, as a motivational speaker, as a career management consultant, and has had a career that's traversed performing, consulting, writing, and is now joining us today with a combination of both her professional and her academic life. Our topic today is a coaching conversation. We're going to be looking at diversity and inclusion, at unconscious bias, and at Black Lives Matter. So surely no more important a topic for our times, and I'm delighted to welcome you, KK. So I wonder whether I could begin by asking you, how does diversity and inclusion manifest itself in your coaching work?
It's kind of varied in that I am a diversity and inclusion consultant. So I'm paid to go and speak on diversity and how we can mitigate unconscious bias, because it's a lot of the unconscious that's going on. And so I go in with a program and I do just that. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for people because people are facing their own biases and that's coming up. So, it's about going in there and doing that. And then there's the other side where just really recently, I'm now speaking within organizations, particularly My G Work. I just spoke to, I think it was 268 people at the event, their first virtual event. And My G Work is really focused on the LGBTQ community. So it was such an honor to be asked to do a presentation on basically diversity and inclusion and how we need to rethink the practices within management. And then as an executive career coach, I'm working with a company called Ezra right now, where I guess in a way I am one of their main consultants that is driving that support to candidates that are in that diverse group that are needing executive coaching. So my career is just all about that, and I'm happy about that.
I'd like to come back to the unconscious bias issue in a moment, but just to ask you, in our coaching world, something which isn't examined is often sort of left to kind of fester. And I wonder, in your experience, is diversity and inclusion named? Is it something that people talk about, or do they hide from it?
I think within organizations, it's under the surface, right? And it takes some good people within the organization to say, hey, we have a problem here, and we need to look at that. But from my experience, particularly working in corporate, it's definitely under the surface. But the wonderful thing about, if we can say any good that's come out of the George Floyd brutal killing, is that people are waking up and organizations are waking up and saying, we've got to look at this, we've got to examine this, or we're just complicit in allowing this unconscious bias, and what we're talking about business, to carry on. And I think big companies are saying we've got to do something. And actually, they want to be held accountable to it. And I think they're making that announcement publicly. So what I'm seeing over the last month is it's coming above the surface.
That's encouraging to hear. We'll come back to George Floyd shortly, but you mentioned unconscious bias, and I was struck most profoundly by our colleague Alexandria, who spoke about unconscious bias as just being a pretty name for racism. And I wondered what your thoughts were.
You know, since this has all come up, George Floyd, it's made me think about that and examine, is this really a bias? Is this really, you know, racism not being named, you know? And especially after Alexandria said that, I think we do ourselves a disservice by saying we are completely unconscious about our behaviors. I think we're very conscious on a certain level, thinking people that really give things thought. You know, I think there is the racism that's there because of generational. I think that we have to call it out. You know, racism is a very interesting thing. You know, prejudice is that thing where, you know, someone's using the N-word and it's really nasty and it's in your face. The racism is this stuff, this toxic feelings of the other person, right? Where you don't like them because you have bought into certain ideologies, maybe that comes from your parents or your grandparents, right? So this is what we're talking about here. So I think people, they don't like to use the word racism, but they sure in the hell don't want to, because they think racism is prejudice, so they don't want to do that, right? But is racism just is unconscious bias just covering up the word racism? I think it is. I think when you don't acknowledge though that ideology that's been imposed upon you as a child, that's there because that's where it comes from. It comes from the family. Yes. You know. So I think if you don't acknowledge it's you got to look at that. You know, you've got to look at it and acknowledge it.
There was a very profound interview with some cricketers yesterday, and the expression was versed that nobody's born a racist. We learn from our families and our societies and our environment, but the prettier version is to say, you know, we have unconscious bias, and it's a very ugly truth to bear.
Yeah. You know, I don't expect an organization to say, you know, we've got a problem with racism here. We need you to come on in, KK. You know, I'm not gonna, no one wants to call that out. I mean, it's an ugly word, you know, but we have to acknowledge it exists. And I'm glad I missed that interview. I have to look that up.
Yes, it's well worth it. And we've mentioned George Floyd and his murder on the 25th of May. It's catapulted the discussion of racism and of Black Lives Matter to the fore. And I wondered what lessons we can learn from that.
The lessons is that we've got to look at it, and not just on our mobile phone. We can no longer sit and say that, because we've been watching this for a number of years, right? Either we've been watching for a number of years. In the UK, we have the Stephen Lawrence murder that just took forever for them to get a verdict of guilty. You know, we've got to say, you know, we can no longer, as the human race, sit and watch this happen to another group of people, because we're all human, right? And we've got to no longer be silent. White, black, red, brown, yellow, I don't care. We have to no longer just sit silent and say, oh, that's terrible, amongst yourself, and you shake your head and you turn the news, or you see it in the paper and you flip. I think the lesson is, and I'm really hoping, is that people of all races are going to say no and continue to protest. And let us also not forget that this is not rioting. I have a very big problem with the word being used as rioting. This is not rioting. This is Rennie, she looked at the 80s in the UK and she said it was an uprising. This is an uprising. An uprising, even when I say that, it's this feeling of change, of transformation, and it uplifts me. So I think we've got to keep this up. We have to keep it so it's not silent, it's not hidden.
You mentioned Rennie Edo-Lodge and her remarkable book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, as such a powerful read. But I'm also thinking about this sort of sense of uprising and transformation, and wondering whether you see the coaching world as having a place in working with people about their unconscious bias, or working through some of the events of the past few months.
I hope so. I hope we can see some transformation there. It is still unfortunate, and it has been unfortunate, that going back to the unconscious bias, it's unfortunate that there's still pushback. People don't want to face it. Particularly if you're talking about, really, I say that kind of 35, 40 years old and above, they don't really want to call out the racism. They don't really want to acknowledge it. I can only hope that in the coaching space, in terms of organizations, that they will recognize, and we have more people saying, you know what, we need to bring this in. What I'd also like to see in the coaching space is people other than the dominant group be coached. Why are we not being coached? I can count in the last nearly 2 years at the corporate company that I do a lot of the career work for. I can count literally, I say I probably had 10 coaches that were Black, and that's including Asian, so Black and Asian, maybe 10. And I've probably worked with close to 200 people.
Gosh, yes.
And everyone coming through the door is not in any way looking like me. And I've had people where they literally look uncomfortable. I've literally had to pass on a client because I sense their lack of trust in me. And it made me question, well, what is that coming from? Is that unconscious, right? Is that a bias? But the people that are brown, they come in and they're relieved. They can talk about what they've experienced at the organizations, how they felt sidelined, how they felt they'd given the company so much and then they've been sidelined, and then their white counterpart had gotten the job with the less experience. So I think it's needed. Coaching, mentoring is needed, but we need to see more of BME group coming through the door, and coaches.
I mean, this sort of deeply embedded attitude to difference is something which needs to be addressed. And as you say, in organizations, it's not just that, the senior people are the only ones getting the attention in terms of development, but also, as you described, that you're seeing so few Black faces in your coaching work, which doesn't make sense. No. And then there you see that's when you get the glimpse of something's wrong. There's an illness in the organization. And it's because of racism that we don't want to call out. See, so racism is very sneaky, right? It's a real sneaky illness. It sneaks upon, it's there. Your parents might say something when you're little and you hear that, and your grandparents may say something, or it's the flippant remark
that, oh, look at them, they're just rioting out there. Look at them, they're just them. Look at them. So it creeps up and it separates.
This notion of othering that I know we've in the past had many conversations about in terms of psychoanalysis, the idea of it being out there as opposed to in us, and the need to recognize that it's not out there, it's part of all of us. But I think the point about uprising that I wonder whether you've got any comments on, that it does seem to be that it's black, it's white, it's everyone coming together now. It's not just black people protesting about the tragedy in America. It seems like the world is responding.
Yeah, I get excited. I'm warmed up because I mentioned that I've been out twice protesting, which The Guardian got me on television, online. But the beautiful thing was that it's so diverse. There's that diversity. There's that Generation Z and the millennials coming together. And it's always the youth, primarily the youth. They are so aware because of technology, and they keep seeing it and seeing it. And now it's like, this is madness. I don't want to be a part of this. I want to stand up. And it was a beautiful sign, a young white woman I caught eyes with in Brighton, and her sign said, you chose the wrong generation to mess with. You know, and then there was another sign from another white young woman saying something to the effect, I will never understand, but I stand with you. Black Lives Matter. Yeah. You know, and that's the beautiful thing. And that's why I call it an uprising. It's the stirring of the soul. It's the stirring of, I internally can no longer stand and be silent. I must say something. I must stand. I must march. I must put my life on the line because it's COVID-19. I must take a chance. You know,
that it's so important to stand together. And you know, I speak to you as a white woman of a certain age, certainly not Generation Z, but as a Black American woman, what has your experience of the last months been like, and what's helped and what's hindered?
I think it's been a very painful. You know, being here away from home, I found that there was a lot of pain that has been suppressed, you know, suppressed, however you want to put it, from my own childhood experiences with policing and the police coming to our door. I'm 4 years old, my twin brother and my sister's 6. My mother has a baby in her arms, and we hear the banging on the door, and it's the police, and we're living in South Central LA, and they open up the door and there's a gun held into my mother and my stepfather's face. And this has been brought back up. Because I know what that policing and that cruelty is about, and that fear that it puts on a child, you know, and it's brought that up. And it's brought feelings, even, you know, as you know, with my classmates, and sharing a group through an academic year, and none of my white friends calling to see if I'm okay. It brings up so much. And then calling out my friends in my class and saying, hey, it's not good enough. We can't sit back. If the youth are doing it, you got to stand for me too. Or it makes me wonder where you lie, where your thoughts are. We recovered from that, you know, as a group. It's wonderful. But it's brought a lot of pain up. It's brought a lot of pain. When we're talking about organizations, my stepfather being denied a full-time contract year after year. He was good enough to keep as a contract player because he was a very talented engineer in aeronautic space engineer. But they would not give him a contract, and my mother she was being ill, so it was clear that we were going to need some insurance, and we didn't have insurance. And maybe 8 months or so, 6 months before, he went to them again, and they told him, we don't give Blacks contracts. Just keep what you got. And shortly thereafter, my mother had terminal cancer. And we could not help but feel that had she been able to go privately to see with the medical insurance, potentially her life would have been saved. And the real tragedy is that after we buried our mother, a month or two later, they gave him a full contract with insurance because of the guilt. And I know that, and that breaks my heart. That breaks my heart. And
a lot to bear. That's a lot to bear, and it's such a powerful message about that just being too late. That we have to acknowledge now. And I'm also struck that your experience as a Black woman here is also one which, when events like this happen, trauma is reignited, and to talk to you, somebody who's a fellow coaching professional, a student on the program, but also to think that your childhood experiences were ones marked by such prejudice is a lot to absorb.
I mean, it's when I think about it, there's so many stories. There's getting off the plane with my mom and in Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, where they were the last to accept us as somewhat equal, and getting off and being an early reader and reading the sign, needing to go to the bathroom and reading the word colored, in Mississippi. That's an early memory. There's so many memories that, I have, and that I think right now, I decided I want to go and get back into therapy to deal with some of this trauma, because it's brought it up, and I need to know how to work with that trauma. And I think right now doing what I'm doing with the diversity is helping, but I want to definitely talk and get this out.
Well, it's wonderful that you're willing to share and to talk. And as we know in the coaching world, you can't really change anything if you don't acknowledge it being something to change. And this is a short conversation about a huge topic, but I'm enormously grateful that you've been willing to just share some ideas and share your experiences. And I know it won't be the last of the conversations we have, and we hope you'll come back and continue the dialogue in the Organisational Psychology Department. Yeah. So thank you, KK.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, please.
For those that I really want to encourage anyone, is particularly with a diverse background, that you hear this or you think someone would love to go into coaching, I want to encourage you, because we need more diversity in the coaching space. I work with 2 big organizations, and we have hundreds of coaches, and maybe 10% are diverse. And I would love to think that I can encourage you to do that.
Oh, that's a great call, and I join that call. I join that call and say, do join us at Birkbeck, where we have some wonderful programs, and we'd be delighted to have you as part of our event and to join KK and I. So thank you for that. Well, next time we're going to be running a series that looks at different career paths for organisational psychologists, different options, having discussions and interviews with people who've taken some surprising routes. So I hope you'll join us again for that. And thank you again, KK. It's been a joy to talk to you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye.